Hello, everyone, and welcome to a recap of Opus 13 here. And this time I am lucky to be joined by my good friend, Alex Hancox. Perhaps you know him better as Mr. Cool. Alex, how are you doing, sir?
Hi, Travis. Great to be back, as always. How you doing?
Good. I'm doing well. Man, Opus 13 was... So I want your thoughts on this. So for me here in America, it was kind of weird because we didn't get our product for like a month or so, I think, after it came out. I think it was close to the end of April before we actually got it, but I think you guys got it a lot sooner, right, in Europe? So it was kind of a weird Opus for me in that there was some stuff in it that I did really like and was enjoyable to play with, but I still remember that whole first month of like, well, I can play it online on Octagon, but I don't have any of the cards, and so yeah, this is kind of a strange one. How did it treat you?
Yeah, it was definitely weird, like America getting it a month later. But I guess, yeah, thankfully we do have the online platforms to be able to play. I mean, I guess it kind of the delays, obviously, because of COVID, didn't matter because we didn't have like any events on the horizon. But yeah, it was really no different to me. Just the weekly spoon sessions, just casual play and practicing, and yeah, just pretty standard Opus for me.
Did you have a favorite deck that you built this Opus that you kind of liked more than anything else? Because if I were to guess, I would say last Opus was probably Storm, right? Or that kind of...
Yeah. Do I really have a favorite? I don't know. I just been really enjoying playing different variants of Sophie. I don't know if I have a favorite version of it, but that's been the sort of my go-to thing this set.
Yeah.
I still like anything with lock in it, and I've kept trying to update the Wind Earth build from last set with new ideas. And yeah, there hasn't been anything I've been down this time because there's been no events. There's been nothing to really work on. It was just kind of playing what I enjoy and what I feel has got the most kind of ways to innovate and change around frequently.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, folks, if you haven't seen one of these before, basically hits and misses. At the start of the Opus, I know Alex does his own written reviews. I've done these with reviews with another Alex Scott of Basidia Gaming, and it's always fun to come back at the end of the Opus and see which cards did you call correctly, that, yep, that one was as good as I thought it was, or as bad as it thought I thought it was, or the ones you were completely wrong in that, oh, this was actually really popular, and I didn't think it would be, or the reverse of, I thought it would be popular, and no one used it. So we'll go ahead and jump right in with Fire, and we'll start with our Fire Legend, Axstar. And I think this one kind of performed as good as I thought it would. Maybe it exceeded my expectations a little. I got to see some neat combos where people would use it in a Fire Lightning deck with a lot of bursts, and they would use things like Dataluma or the Seymour backup, or maybe a combination of both, to purposely deal themselves an EX burst point of damage, so that way they could guarantee the Axstar would always go off. So seeing him in practice, he did exceed my expectations a little bit. How'd you feel?
Yeah, same sort of thing. He exceeded my expectations. I still think he's a very volatile card, which I think will be improved with Opus 14, because we're getting that new Larsa Legend, which allows you to manipulate your damage a bit better.
Mm-hmm.
Like the times I find Axstar, I think the scariest are when like I'm about to deal the third point of damage, my opponent hasn't hit any EX burst yet, and I know they're kind of just sitting there holding one in hand. I know if that third damage is an EX burst, there's a big opportunity for them to create a swing turn, and if it's just not, then all it can do is kind of just search Rain, and
Yeah.
If Rain's good enough, great. But yeah, it is a very up and down kind of card. It's good. I think it's one of those cards we'll see in the future sort of sparsely, because it's kind of like a future-proof kind of card.
Mm-hmm.
The stronger EX bursts get, and if we get any more kind of damage manipulation, Axstar will only get better. So I think right now we're seeing him at his worst. I think his worst is still pretty good.
Wow, yeah, so may look forward to him in the future. Well, you mentioned Rain, so let's go right into Rain. This was a card that I found a lot of people really undersold when he first came out. Like, a lot of folks just didn't seem very high on him, and at least around where I play, I saw him everywhere. Basically, any deck that had, any kind of mono fire, and one of my local guys is a big mono fire guy. I mean, Rain was in every deck, and when he would come down for 1 CP, maybe sometimes 2 or 3, but a lot of times 1 CP, hit something for 5, go in with haste to damage 3. Like, I found him to be pretty darn effective, and I was a bit surprised when he first was revealed. It seemed a lot of folks were just very on him. What do you think?
I think it kind of comes off the fact that Samurai's was like the fire deck to play last set. Like, there wasn't really a different mono fire. It was like Tenzen and Scion or Bust. And that deck was all about playing Tenzen off like no backups or 2 backups and trying to. You don't really get to more than 3 backups in that deck unless you kind of have to, unless the game drags on. In which case, Rain isn't going to be the best card. So it was like Rain was like, I thought it will see play if these Samurai decks sort of go towards a higher curve, try and go for the long game, which some of them have done. But yeah, and then if Mono Fire itself without Samurais becomes better to the backup building one, then great. I think the thing that maybe people would have undersold Rain for is the fact that Mono Fire doesn't really have a backup searcher outside the Dominion Legionary, which isn't the best card in the world. So it's harder to ramp your backups fast and fire to get him to that 1-2 CP, 4,000, 5,000 damage sort of range. But yeah, it was kind of obvious that he was a pretty insane card just by reading what he does. It's just obviously limited to only Mono Fire, really.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, so the last 2 fire we'll mention, and it kind of goes in with Samurai's, the Magisa package was the new backup Zondi we got, as well as the Porum. And I would say these kind of met my expectations. The Zondi saw even more play than I originally thought, because 7k on a backup, that's like Fusoya level, right? Yeah, you have to take a point of damage, but it's probably going to be worth it. I don't think I ever saw anyone actually use the Zondi action ability to like search for anything out. Same with the Porum or the Palom. I don't think I ever saw anyone use the Palom with a Porum on board, but for the most part, they would either use the Zondi to blow up an enemy forward, or they would just shoot their own Magisa with it and then go search out.
Yeah, it was definitely a nice flavor for both, like the Palom doing more damage with Porum and Zandy being able to search himself out. Like maybe we'll see that interaction actually come up potentially next set, because there's the 1-cost Allure coming, which it works with the 8-drop Zand. And the Palom, I mean, I don't know, that card might I did a few times this set. I played Firewater, and I had the Porum 2-drop out on board, and I played the Palom, did 8k.
Nice.
It's a niche thing, but if it comes up, it's great on it, obviously. But I thought Magisa with the Palom and the Zand were going to have a lot more impact, but Magisa kind of just didn't work so well with this meta game, with the Sophie decks all playing Kukulkan and even stuff like Leviathan. That basically, if your Magisa goes off, great, you're probably in a really good position to win the game. And if it doesn't, it just kind of doesn't really do anything after that. So that kind of risky strategy didn't work as well this set as it did last set. But I think those cards will continue to see play. Zand is a very nice card, especially at being able to get rid of Sid Randell, which can be a bit of a pain sometimes for fire decks.
So perfect that you mentioned him. My Alex, of course, with our perfect segue, because we're going to Ice, and we're going to start with Sid Randell and kind of Remedy too. And this was a card I had very high hopes for, because he has such a unique effect. And I can honestly say, I think he met my expectations. Part of me wondered, like, again, there was always this idea, like, well, he's got a clearly great effect, but he's got a weak body. Is he going to be worth it? And playing with him, he never got to the level where, like, he was in every deck. Like, part of me kind of wondered he would be. But there are certain decks I would play against him, and if you didn't have an answer, if you didn't have a sum, it was just like, oh, what do I do? I remember I was playing one of my tactics decks with like March and Ritz. It was just all these characters with entry effects, and I remember my opponent had it, and I was like, oh, this deck doesn't work anymore. What do I do? So he kind of was where I expected him to be. Remedy, honestly, was a huge disappointment for me. Maybe I just have bad luck. I would have her in my hand, and my opponent turn 1 would drop their Sarah or whatever their searcher were, and I was like, no, can you wait till I get Remedy out to go search? Like, I could never get her effect to go off. It was really frustrating. What'd you think of these two?
Randall's kind of like Axar in a way that I feel like he's got that kind of future proof to him. Negating auto abilities on entry is a huge deal. And I did wonder, is this card going to be like not going to see play because he's too weak, or still the effect's going to be so powerful that he sees all the plays? I think the reason he isn't seeing as much play is because Ice as an element isn't in the best spot right now, and it's on that kind of that thin, that sort of thread of, if Ice becomes good, Randall will become good, and if Discard is good in that Ice, then Remedy will become good because she can search Randall and she does some nice things. So if Ice is in a better spot, I would expect these two to crop up again, because as much as they are weak in stat line, their effects are going to be strong probably always. So I do expect to see more of them in the future, and and Brandel definitely met my expectations.
That's awesome. So probably one of my favorite cards from this set, and definitely exceeded even the high expectations I had for it, is Charlotte. And Charlotte, I absolutely adored this card. And, you know, I compared it to the Cecil from Opus 1, which was a water card. It had the same thing, but he was a 5 cost, like 8K. And he was just so expensive. So it was legit. It was the cost value. It was the fact that Charlotte can come down for 2, and she's now this magnet that your opponent has to target with including their buffs. That's the key part. You know, you can steal their Tyro buff, you can steal their Belias, whatever it is. And then really key on damage 3, not only does she get more power, she takes less damage. I put her in my prison deck. I would just put her in any deck. Like, it was very satisfying if they'd have something like their Laguna or something that could repeatedly duel the White Tiger. It's like, go ahead, you can freeze Charlotte into oblivion. You're not touching anybody else. So I adored Charlotte. What did you think of her?
Yeah, I really liked her. I was unsure at first if being an ice she was going to see play, but I tried her a couple of times, especially when I was using Sid Randall in order to protect him from any like summons they might have to remove him. And I really like the card. I think it's, like you say, what kind of Cecil Opus 1 should have been. That card never really made any sense. Probably at the time, it made sense to just err on the side of caution and make that card bad, because that effect would have been quite powerful back then on a card like Charlotte. Nowadays, it's definitely fine. The damage 3 is a nice bonus. Being a knight, you know, comes up sometimes in certain decks. If Water Ice was a bit better, you'd see it with like Avelio and Agrias, getting the extra stat buff, stuff like that. But overall, yeah, really nice card, and I'm sure it'll keep cropping up in the future to protect threats like Sid Randall, like 2CP Cloud, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. So we got a new Final Fantasy VIII package, and we'll kind of talk about all these at once. The Squall backup, the Laguna, the Quistis, the Renoa. This kind of met the expectations I had for it. I still think that Squall backup is terrible on its own, but obviously it's meant to empower the Laguna. I do like the Renoa a lot, even though I don't know if I ever even got to do her damage 5 effect, but just the fact that she gets cheaper for the amount of 8 characters, and then you get a card back. And the Quistis was pretty nice too. And then the Laguna, I saw quite a few people build a deck around the Laguna, and if he got going, he could win the game by himself. Like, dull freezing 2 characters, locking out their backups, locking out their forwards. Squall makes him a 10k, and then he freezes on entry. Like, if you got that Laguna package going, I got to see the power of it. It was far too inconsistent for me. Sometimes I actually thought about playing the backup Renoa Searcher from Opus 2 just to guarantee I could find him. But yeah, it was a neat little package. It's a shame that for whatever reason, they seem to think Final Fantasy VIII only has 3 characters, which is Squall, Laguna, and Renoa. I guess they forget that other characters exist in it, but it's a neat little package. What did you think?
Yeah, it is a neat package. It's fun to play, especially in Wind Ice. You can do a lot of fun stuff with Renoa and bouncing her when you've got a lot of Ochus and stuff on the board, so she's cheap and, you know, even 0 cost, and you keep bouncing her back, adding the Squall back, adding more Lagunas back. Yeah, I think the main reason, because it's very, Laguna School is very similar to Agrias Avelia. I think the only reason we haven't seen more of that pairing is because you can search Avelia and you can't search School, or you can search School, but you can only do it with Laguna, of course. So, you know, if we ever get instead of a selfie that just searches for Seed Candidate Forwards, like gets on like a selfie that actually searches for like School backup, something like that, that would be great. Even a Renoa, if it could search for that School backup, just so you could have that online with the Laguna, would be great, because it is very powerful, and even as early as turn 2, it can come down if you open the School on the Laguna, and it can deal a lot of damage very fast.
Hobby Japan, if you're listening, there's Ward, there's Kyros, there's Alone, there's so many characters in that game. Feel free to, you know, expand which ones you're picking from, by all means. So last ice card we'll mention is our Ice Legend Physalis from Brave Exvius. And this was one, trying to think. I think she kind of met my expectations, because there were times she felt very strong. And just as I'd predicted, there were also times where, like, if I was going against the Sophie deck, they had a full hand every turn, so she actually didn't do anything. The one thing I think everyone universally agreed on was that the Physalis Bullet is a great special, which proven to be true. In Mono Ice, it was fun when it would come up. I saw some people play her with Earth, so they could specifically use things like Kusith to recur the bullet and just blast people to oblivion with that. So she kind of met where I thought she would be. What about for you?
Yeah, I first thought she was garbage, and my opinion of her got a bit better over time. My problem is, I think it's one of those things where Ice, they have to be really careful because of like things that happened in the past with Thaumaturge and Gesper. You know, if you make discard cards too powerful, or cards that benefit off discard too powerful, then they'll just make the game not fun to play. And Faisal is sort of at a core is like the way you play Final Fantasy with the curve. You know, if let's say you go first, you play a backup, then they play 2 backups, right? And they go down to 3 cards in hand. You can just slam Faisal right there off the 1 backup and draw a card and start going. Or you can wait, you know, you can go to 3 backups with the intention of playing your next turn. But then if your opponent just plays another backup, another 2 CP, then they end with 4 cards in hand. So Faisal is very reliant on that extra discard. Now we have stuff like Argath, which is already a nice little cheap discard card. And we have Flans, but I think Faisal will get more powerful the moment we get another solid cheap discard option that's just a little bit better than what we currently got. So I think she's definitely got potential for the future, and she definitely helped Ice a lot, but still leaves something to be desired.
That was a great analysis. I really like that. So moving on to Wind, and we're going to start with the Ochu, and I kind of want your opinion on all the monsters in this set, but Ochu specifically, he obviously saw the most play, and I remember I said that in my review with Alex Scott, was that he's a win card, and because he overpays for himself, you know, he only costs 1, and what does he get you back 2? And I was like, man, and I even said I could see this in a lock deck, a super easy way to just get the cast counter down for lock. So I'm not surprised we saw him. And then, of course, it just becomes this free body. But we didn't really see any of the other monsters. I think maybe I saw someone use an Abyss Worm once or twice. So tell me about Ochu and just kind of this monster cycle in general. Is this a miss for monsters?
I saw the Iron Giant used a little bit because that's also FF8. So Fire Ice, FF8, kind of a fun casual deck. But yeah, the Ochu was like definitely one of those cards that looked decent on paper. And then when you play it, it's one of those cards that you really notice as you play. Like, let's say, you know, you go turn 1, back up, pass. Turn 2, play another 2-drop part. If you would normally just pass there, right? 1 back up, 1 back up sideways. But then you can play Ochu and then play Ash. It's like this perfect, nice little turn 2, which gets stuff on the board and gets your strategy going. And like you said, with Lock, it's really nice. So I'm not really surprised that was the key to kind of making Wind Ice a kind of semi-top tier deck this set. And yeah, it's there always seems to be one of these monsters out of these lines of less desirable ones that actually does see competitive play, and Ochu's definitely gone well above that. It's probably made the Wind Ice archetype this set. So yeah,
it's all
good on that little plant thing.
Right. So this is Wind and a little dab of Wind Fire, but the Shara and Lednar package that came out to support Tactics Advanced, and I built an entire deck around this. And I'm curious to know what your experience was with her, if you used her a lot, because I was kind of underwhelmed by Shara when I saw her. I was like, wow, that's the legend. And getting the Ritz back for free, okay, that's nice. But I'll be honest, I don't think I ever resolved the counters. Like, people they would kill her before I even could, because she has to wait a full turn before you can do the counter. So yeah, she just never really worked out for me. And same with Lednar. Like, I don't know. I said this in my review with Alex, like, to me, Lednar was like a weird version of Arden. Like, Arden has Brave, so Arden basically says, you have to do something about me because I will always block you. You gotta sack off a character. But Lednar will just turn sideways, and then people will just go over the top of him. And it's kind of crazy to me that, like, you can actually kill him with Amaterasu when he enters before the counter goes, which, like, that seems to fly in the face of what he was supposed to do. And again, maybe it was just bad luck, but every time I'd use him, people would just happily throw away 2 cards to kill him. And then he doesn't even work with March because you have to play him from hand, so you can't even like March bring in the Lednar for free, which you would always want to bring in Ritz anyway. I don't know. I found those two to be very underwhelming, and like March Ritz are still great, but it was like, right, but I want March Ritz to do their thing. Like, I don't know. How did you feel about Shara and Lednar?
Yeah, Lednar particularly very underwhelming. Shara I actually quite liked. I thought the additional way to get back Ritz, especially being on color, was quite nice. I really liked, you know, if you open like Shara, Immune, Ritz, you can do that, discard Ritz, play Shara, get the Ritz back, discard the Ritz for Immune, bounce Shara back, do it again next turn, one of those nice cheap things.
Yeah,
it was a cool card, and obviously if they kill the Shara, that's, you know, you lose the counter ability protection, but it means they've wasted removal on a
True.
0 CP forward instead of doing it on something like the Ritz or whatever else. But yeah, the whole archetype in general of FFTA, it's definitely like I definitely felt, again, it was something they erred on the side of caution with, and they didn't want to give it too much like super good support. I still don't really know why the Lednar doesn't gain counters when it enters from Marsh. I actually think it probably could have gotten away with that fine, having played against and with the deck quite a bit. But yeah, Lednar in general, it's got Ku Cullen syndrome,
Yeah.
which is basically any card that has a really cool effect, but is completely obliterated by Ku Cullen the Impure, the 1 CP Water Summon, which is being played at 3 in every single Sophie deck right now, and that's kind of it for Lednar
Yeah.
at the moment.
Well, so kind of going off that, because Lednar's whole thing was his protection, right? And the last two I want to mention in Wind is the Dryad Summon and the mid forward that could enter with back attack. And the idea was that both of these had protection. They could protect you from abilities specifically. I thought that would be really relevant because at least kind of before earlier in the game, there wasn't a whole lot of protection. You know, you had Ishtola, you had Unsaganashi, but there wasn't a whole lot of stuff that says, hey, let me protect this with this. But I didn't see anyone use them ever. Do you think they were just weird effects or overcosted, undercosted? Do you have any feelings on those?
I mean, Dryad's one of those cards we can wonder what it looked like when they first made it and they were testing it in the Hobby Japan offices or whatever, because it says, it stops abilities but not summons and doesn't draw a card until you get to like 5 damage or whatever.
Yeah.
Maybe it had one of those things it doesn't have in testing and it was too good or what, but because it doesn't have either of those things, it's just not great. It's very niche. Like summons are really relevant right now. They weren't, a few sets ago, but they are now. Not being able to protect from summons is a big deal. Basically the same problem that mid has, but mid is also very expensive. I thought maybe if Marshritz was good in like Fire Wind, it would see play in that because you can like leave up your 3 backups. Yeah. You threaten your Amaterasus, you can threaten this this card, but it just didn't really have any impact, and I'm not really surprised, but we might see a bit of niche use from one of them in future, but not great.
That's fair. All right, so going to Earth. This is a card I can say I totally underrated. I didn't value this card at all when I saw it, and then I very much jammed it into a couple of my decks and used it a lot, and that is Cecil, the new 3 cost 7, and I don't know why, but so apparently fight spells in this game are really good. Cecil, Hecaton Kyre, Sarah Mobius. And for whatever reason, I didn't value them. And tell me if my thinking is kind of right or wrong on this, that I started thinking about why do people like these fights? Like, people were thinking this Cecil was great. And I was like, but why? Like, okay, it does 7k on entry or 8. Like, there's other cards that do that, right? But I started to think, compared to something like a Ranjit, which, okay, that does 8k in entry, that can't get through an Ishtola or a Kane or these cards that have, like, they don't receive damage. Whereas the Cecil effect does, because you're not doing damage, you're actually forcing 2 guys to fight each other, which is very different. And then on damage 3, of course, he got 1,000 and Brave, which meant he could usually trade up to something. And in particular, I used him in my Golbez deck as a way to purposely take the 6 point of damage, so Golbez could then come in and summon the Archfiend. So I was 100% wrong on Cecil. I was not high on this card at all, and he totally proved me wrong.
Yeah, I was more the opposite. I was really high on him, and then he actually kind of fell flat for me. I thought it was going to be really nice in Wind Earth, because I thought if the Storm deck's going to be good again, then we'll play Cecil, and he's nice because we don't have that many cards in that 3 CP slot. We don't have many ways of just single target removal, but it just turned out that until you get to the 3 damage plus 1k and Brave, you're not actually killing that many things you want to kill. A lot of the things you want to kill are around 7k. So Cecil trades off and you take a damage, which isn't nice. I think the best use people found for him competitively was in Monks, where a lot of times people will play around the Young's 1 damage, summon a Monk from hand, and Cecil allows you to force that 1 damage so you can get the Young off whenever you like. But other than that, I thought it was going to be way better. Maybe he'll be a bit better in the future, but he just didn't quite line up for me this set.
No, that's fair. I will say on that, he feels great when he will live and his target will die, but I agree with you, like, it didn't feel good to make him also die with that target. It's like, I don't want to do that. Like, I need him to live. So you mentioned Monks. Let's go right to that, because holy cow, did that come out of nowhere. Okay, so what new Monks did we get? We got a new standard unit Monk. He probably wasn't the big reason. We got the new Yang. And then we kind of unexpectedly got Sophie, and I'm very curious to know what you feel about this. So obviously monks were very prominent in this meta. I saw people playing them all the time. There's a guy at my locals who just hates playing against them because he's like, oh my god. And a lot of people have pointed to the Yang and said this Yang is ridiculous, which he kind of is. It's weird to me in a set that so much was based around damage 5. All the summons get a different effect at damage 5. You have the Behemoth King at damage 5. It's so weird Yang has a damage 1 ability. Like, I don't know, that just seems so strange. Yeah, it's a whole set based around 5 damage, except this guy, he gets it at damage 1. So it's undeniably strong, to play a 6 CP mat for free and then go search out whatever. However, I kind of argued that it really was Sophie, the fact that Sophie fit into monks, because now, beforehand, they were just big bodies that would just beat you down. Now they can passively kill you too, because Sophie's the biggest body of all. So I kind of think it was really Sophie more than Yang that made monks so ridiculous, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh yeah, it's Sophie for sure. Like, it's kind of like Ursula came out, this legend for monks, and it's like, yeah, it's a good card, but the forwards it can bring back, it brings back a 2CP 6k with no ability, right? Yeah. Or it brings back backups. Obviously, you want these cards like Lena to bring back forward so you can spam the board for cheap. Sophie's the absolute perfect card to bring out with Ursula, which meant Ursula saw a lot of play in other not dedicated monk builds, but in the dedicated monk builds, Ursula became very scary because you build this monk backup line, you bring out Sophie with her effect, and you can use the backups as ammo and just machine gun down the opponent. So Sophie definitely made that deck, and I actually think it's one of those ones. It's one of the reasons I would have liked to have seen this format more competitively, if we'd been able to, because we had monks win the first big event we had online, which was the Zanarkand Open.
Yeah.
And I think the monk decks have probably changed a lot since then. I think rightly so, but it definitely seemed like an archetype. Whether you play just pure mono earth or you splash a bit of water or whatever, the monks was a very interesting deck this set, and it was nice that it got love in the same way that samurais did, and definitely seems like a potential best deck, if not definitely a tier 1 deck. So yeah, Sophie was really good for that, for sure.
Gotcha. So I gotta mention Bunavelze really quickly. He was just at first I thought he might be kind of a meme, but playing with him, he was pretty fun. I loved using him in my Gold Bez deck because, again, I wanted to get to 6 damage anyway, and when he started attacking and he's just breaking characters twice a turn, whoo, that felt bad. But I also saw a few people actually build decks around him. They would build this like multi-element based deck. They'd put the lightning backup in to give him haste, and he would then just start going. And it was a neat little deck. Like, I don't think he was anything that set the world on fire, but it was cool to actually see people actually design decks around him. Do you have any feelings on him?
Actually, someone joined my stream and played against me a couple of months ago with a Bunavelze and Behemoth K deck. It was like an Earth, Wind, Lightning thing, and I was like, as I was playing it, I was like, what's going on here? And then, he had instead of having the Lightning backup, he had Red Mage, the Opus XIII haste giver to give Bunavelze and Behemoth K haste. And that was great. It was crazy how much I could be just kind of dead out of nowhere if I kind of got him to 3 or 5 damage, because then he had Bunavelze and Behemoth K swinging in for 2 points, and they're actually just so big and beefy. And if you can get Bunavelze down to 2 or 4 CP, recur it with Q-Sith, then there's only so many times you can take out a 10k that costs 2 or 4 CP. So it was definitely a cool strategy, and I would like to see more of it in the future. I think they gave him a bit of hard time at 10 CP, but yeah, it's a very cool card nonetheless.
Yeah. So finally in Earth, I got to mention Leo from Crystal Chronicles. He was our Earth legend, and the moment I saw this card, I was like, why is this a worse version of Lena, a card that just came out? And the only reason I'm honestly even mentioning him is because he was that legend. I pulled 6 of them from like boxes and packs. I was just like, why do I keep pulling this card? I don't want more Leos. So I like made a deck around him just because like, well, I've got a bunch of them, so I'll show them off. And granted, there were a few times that for 1 CP and then getting to bring stuff back, kind of like the Lena could, was cool. At the same time, I still just think he's a worse Lena because he's restricted to your turn. He costs an extra CP to use as opposed to Lena. Like, yeah, I'm just bringing him up because I pulled 6 of them. What'd you think of Leo?
I thought Leo was going to be really great. I thought, Lena was already very powerful as is, but Lena was taking up that light slot, and I thought it was pretty easy with North Talon and Epitaph to get Leo down, with a few counters in the space of 1 or 2 turns. It just turns out that 3k is a lot lower than 8k, so even though he wasn't able to be broken by Fenrir, you a gust of wind sends them to the break zone. So yeah, it was just mainly that. He's a very cool card with a lot of potential, but they again, one of those cards they probably tested in the Hobby Japan offices, probably not once per turn or not with a cost to it, but they added these extra things to him, and he kind of falls flat because of that.
Yeah, that's fair. So moving on to Lightning, a card that I didn't really expect much from, and it actually became like a premier card for me, was the new Odin, the new 5-cost Odin we got. And for me, in any deck I play Lightning, so like my Scions deck or my Warriors of Darkness deck, I was always kind of trying to find an EX Burst Lightning summon, so maybe that's just a me thing. And I used to use the Opus XIII Ramu a lot, which would reduce their power by 8,000, but cards have gotten stronger these days, and so a lot of times I felt like that Ramu just wasn't enough, especially because he only does 7 when you cast it. It's only 8 on a burst. So this Odin has kind of taken that slot for me, where like it basically breaks all the relevant things I'm looking for, and then at damage 5, I really did value it only costing 2 CP that I could, pitch a single card from hand, boom, break something outright. So I didn't really expect to use this Odin at all, and at least for me personally, he took over a lot of slots that I'd previously had for Ramu into my decks. Did you use him at all?
Yeah, I used him a bit, and I exceeded my expectations by quite a lot. He's honestly one of those perfectly designed cards. I think 5 CP is just the right amount for him to both be a playable card and a very strong EX burst, and the 5 damage making cost 2. Whether you're playing, like self-damage heavy decks like Fire Lightning with Akstar and stuff, it's just a nice bonus, because sometimes the card is just playable at 5. There's something you absolutely must kill that is 5 or less. Yeah, and I like that, you don't always get punished, when your opponent hits him on the EX burst. If I've got like a Tenzen out, I don't want this Odin to kill my Tenzen. I don't want it to kill my Lock, and it doesn't. So it kind of works out for both players, and it seems like a fair card in that respect, and it's nice.
Agreed. Well designed. So speaking of must-kill targets, Behemoth King. This guy is very interesting, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on him, because he seemed to be all over the place. And for me personally, I rated him pretty highly, and playing against him with a whole manner of decks, he does feel very dependent on the situation. There are some decks I had no trouble at all dealing with it, especially if I had summons. I still was running Diabolos, Alexander, things like that. I was like, oh, Behemoth King, that's dead. And then there are other decks where I would have forward-heavy abilities where you can't target it with that forward, otherwise that forward breaks and you lose it. And he gave me a lot of trouble, and there was always this fear factor too of like, surprise, you're dead, because once he swings too and he gets that 12,000 buff, oh man. So he was really interesting. He was definitely the threat I thought he would be. There were times I was able to deal with him easily, but other times he was really scary. So he was kind of like he really depended on what I had going against him. How did Behemoth King treat you?
Yeah, like we were talking about with the ice cards before, it's like if Lightning was a better element outside of really the only thing it saw playing was Fire Lightning this set, then Behemoth King would probably be a lot scarier, because it is just a better version of Estinian, coming 7 sets after he did. And Estinian was a very good card back then, a very scary card for a lot of decks to deal with. It was also a lot harder to kill Estinian back then. It was also Lightning was a lot stronger. Yeah. Now Lightning is a lot weaker for many reasons, and it's a bit easier to kill Behemoth King for the average deck. So it's a solid card. It can be scary in a lot of situations, but yeah, some of the times, as you say, it can fall flat. It can do nothing. You've got a Diabolos or whatever removal piece for him, and you handle him fine. But yeah, he's a solid card. I'm sure he'll continue to see play.
So what about our sleeves? We got the 7 CP Lightning. This was a card that I saw a lot of other people use. I never personally used it. I honestly can't tell you why. It just didn't appeal to me. I did see other people use it pretty effectively. Some people would try to do cute things where like they would bring it in and then like kill it immediately before it resolves, so that way no one got their cards back, kind of thing. But I don't know. Even seeing it in play, like, I think the card's fine, but I don't know. It's just maybe it's just not my play style. What did you think of Lightning?
Card's great because it has that utility of you get your own stuff back or deal with your opponent's threats that are on the board right now. It also has Kukulkan syndrome again, which is basically a thing now that if it didn't have that, if it like just created an effect where having its text wipe didn't stop it from whenever it died getting the cards back, it would see a lot more play. It's literally just that, like Mist Dragon and Kukulkan are everywhere, so it's very hard to find a good position to play that Lightning that you can kind of ride to win the game. I really like that you can remove another copy of herself and just kind of infinitely loop her in some matchups, so you never run out of gas. Yeah, she's a very nice card, and I definitely thought she was better than she was, and I think, like, yeah, it makes sense that she's like a hero rather than a legend for this set, even though at first she did feel like a kind of bonus legend.
Yeah, that's fair. So last thing we got to mention in Lightning is, I mean, the Void himself, right? X-Death returning from Opus 2. Who pictured that? Like a Void just opened in your card table and he came crawling out and he was like, mannequins. Mannequins were cool. So I wasn't around playing the game back in Opus 2. I know obviously you won some big tournament. Was it Worlds? I know you won some big tournament with the mannequins deck. And you are Mr. X-Death, so I'm going to go ahead and let you take the floor on this one. Just tell me, what did you think of mannequins? Were you pleased with them?
Yeah, it was really, really good support. They tried, which is nice. I mean, they usually do. If stuff's super outdated, like WoF was when they brought out Rain and all that, it's nice that, yeah, that stuff is generally pretty good. And Delusory Warlock, Delusory Knight, Lady of Antiquity, all very good cards.
What a
combo. Rest of them all pretty solid. But yeah, it's a nice deck to play because it plays the same every game, so it can get a bit boring, but it is very consistent. You know, you get to play a very minimal number of backups, which means you have a lot of room for forwards and summons. And yeah, you're just so likely to hit it. You know, you open your Warlock. You can get a Warlock, you can get the Antiquity straight away, you can get a Knight and use the Knight to get another Warlock, and you're always going to get to 4 or 5 backups very quickly. And X-Death is, you know, even now with that cost reduction, a very valuable boss monster and an absolute powerhouse for the deck to have that really no other forward, even Sophie sometimes can meet in power level.
Yeah.
So it's nice.
Yeah, it was fun, and it was a deck that for the first time truly made me value the multi-playable symbol in the upper right-hand corner of our cards. Because I'm so used to playing unique characters, because usually those are the stronger characters. You know, the multi-playable stuff is reserved for standard units and things that aren't very strong. And so it was so satisfying to be like, not only is this, you know, imaginary, whatever the Onion Knight one was called, not only is he a beater on his own, here's a second one. Now you got 2 9Ks that are going to swing under you. That cloud of, you know, that counterfeit Wraith messed you up. Here's a second one. How do you want to deal with that? Like, yeah, and just the way the engine worked with the Warlock into the Knight, into a Warlock, Lady of Antiquity, color fixing all of it, which was great. And then on top of that, here comes X-Death for 2 CP. Like, what a cool little engine. I hope they don't just like forget about it and it's just like done forever, because it was really cool. All right, moving to water. We can cool off. So Agrius, man, this was a card that I didn't think it was bad. It clearly read great, but I actually undervalued how good it would be. And it was only when I saw it in action, I was like, oh my God, this card's ridiculous. Like, it could do so much for a rare, and especially once you got your Avelia backup down. She comes down, especially if you're using the one that was the Anthem version, this 10K draws you a card, could potentially kill something else. And that was just, I rarely honestly saw her on damage 5, because if she came down on damage 5, whoo, God help you. She is one of the few cards in the game, Alex, that even though she has a burst, I don't want her to go to damage. I'm actually disappointed. Oh, yeah. Damn it, I wanted to play her. Like, I don't want to just draw the card off of it. So what'd you think of Agrius?
Yeah, I definitely need to touch on that. There's definitely a lot of times where I'm like, I've hit Agrius into damage, and you feel that EX push, like they're drawing a card, but then it's their best card. So it's like, actually, you know what? That's not too bad.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's one of those cards that I think got better as the set went on. I think at first everyone was just jamming her into every water deck they could. Obviously very nice in FFTA, basically like a boss monster for that water lightning archetype. And obviously very good in Sophie. Thing that kind of made me skeptical at first was that a lot of the Sophie decks that were popular early on were playing like tricolor. So you really wanted your Sarah to search Princess Sarah to make ICP or something like that. And then you had to naturally draw the Avelia. And that's obviously the problem I brought up earlier with School and Laguna. But then when you realize the kind of the best Sophie decks are playing Water Earth anyway, being able to just search that Avelia every time, basically having 6 copies of it, makes Agrius so consistent. And the card is just so ridiculously loaded. It's quite incredible for a rare. And it's nice to see something like that. And it shaped the meta. It was a wonderful card because up till now 7Ks were in a great spot because the removal for them wasn't good, and they were always on like a good curve. You know, stuff like Ishtola was still kicking about, and Agrius just completely knocked that card out of the format, which was really nice because that card is a pain in the ass to deal with otherwise.
Yeah, Absolutely. So speaking of Agrius is of course the protector of Elvalia. Elvalia is her charge. What did you think of the new Ovalia Legend backup we got? This one I wasn't super high on, and like I saw some cute tricks with it. I saw some people like, oh, I'm gonna Aegis my Veritas, so then it comes back and I get all these effects. But for the most part, like I don't know, I still find those effects to be weird because I never saw anyone use both the haste and the return. Because again, that would imply that it's a new card that then goes into attacks, that then dies and comes back. And maybe it was never intended to, but I always found that I don't know, like. For me personally, I prefer to just play the 2 CP Ovalia, but I know some people really like doing the Aegis tricks. What did you think of her?
Yeah, I much prefer the 2 CP for general play, but the 3 CP is fun for tricks. It was actually in the Water Lightning deck that won the first season of League of Light recently, and it's funny you mentioned that doing the two things in one turn, because I'm pretty sure in the finals, Luca, who won with the deck, he did use Aegis on I think an Agrios that came in that turn, hasted it, swung for a damage, and then used Fam for it, brought it back, and then killed something else, and then got a damage 5 search. And draw a card off of Elia, which was a really nice turn. It's one of those turns that's like really nice to watch, and obviously probably feels really good to play. But yeah, it's one of those cards. It's a very theatrical card, whereas the other Ophelia is just a very kind of consistent. This does exactly what you want it to do, which probably means it's better for general purpose play. But the 3 CP is, we don't get many legend backups. And as niche as it is, because FFTA is quite poorly supported, it is a cool card that does some cool tricks.
That's a great description. Very theatrical. I love that. I'm going to use that if I see someone playing it. So a card I completely underrated was Nicole. When I saw this card, I was like, that just seems really lame. But seeing it alongside these Sophie decks or just anything else that could play water, and it had all these multi-element forwards, and it's like the power buff I never found to be too relevant, but again, just that, oh no, they can just draw a card just for this body being there. Like, yeah, I had put no stock in him whatsoever, and obviously I was wrong about that.
Yeah, Nicole is one of those cards I could probably write a whole essay about it. It's really weird. I think it's the biggest trap of the format, to be honest. And I think were we not in a COVID world, we would have figured that out about Nicole a lot sooner. But obviously it saw the most play in Sophie decks because they have Sophie and Sarah, which are really powerful multi-element forwards, and you could branch out into Ice with Nimbus and Celestia and so on. But it just doesn't actually work the way you want it to work all the time, because so many times you have it and you don't have a multi-element forward to play with it, so it's just this 2 CP 5k do nothing. And before now, you don't get into the habit of playing cards like that have very specific times you can play them, and drawing a card isn't actually that good. But for some reason, the early Sophie builds, it kind of worked, and then everyone realized the spot was better served on something else. So actually Nicole was a card I underrated. Then I started overrating as I saw more and more people using it, using myself. Then by the end of the format now, I'm like, that card is absolutely dreadful. So
we got to get a graph of Alex's rating of Nicole. It's a roller coaster, just all over the place. And that's really fun when a card like that changes so much for your opinion. So this one I kind of have a special place to talk to you about, because the first video I had you on was talking about water summons, and we talked about a lot of those old Leviathans. Well, we got a new Leviathan that certainly saw play, and he did something very different from all of them, and he was on an EX burst, and I mean, I thought this card was great. I think what made this card so good is that compared to some of the other summons, so like the Dryad or the Alexander, I kind of thought those were only good if you got to 5 damage. Whereas kind of like with the Odin, I thought this Leviathan was good all the time, and then at 5 damage, he just became incredible. So to me, that was kind of one of the keys, because at his worst, you choose something, you draw a card. It kind of has that Belias ability, and you can protect it so you can trade in combat or whatever. And then at 5 damage, you just protect everything on your board. So I thought this was kind of one of the summons water really needed. I was very happy with it. What about you?
Yeah, the more I play with it, the more I love it. It's weird because I played it in Sophie a lot at the start of the format, and then it kind of just became the next summon you'd play if you had room for it. But then I started playing a standard version of the Doga build that saw success in an L6 tournament in Japan recently, where you're playing like 20 plus summons, so you can obviously fit 3 Leviathan in. And yeah, when you're able to play 3 copies and you see it a lot, it's a really, really nice card to have. If you have the room for it, it's lovely. 5k damage reduction, has so many points in a game where it can be good, winning fights. protecting your stuff from something. And the damage 5, making all your stuff untargetable, that is actually a mad, crazy effect to get as a bonus. And the fact that you're always drawing a card with the X burst as well, it's a very well designed card, and I hope we see more of it. And I think we will in coming sets.
All right, so we'll end with water on a card that there's no debate about. Anyone could see how amazing this card was. You could make a very good argument that this is the best card in the entire set, and that is the beautiful Yoshitake Amano art, our Sarah backup, who could search out our royals, our kings, our princes, our princesses, and I think this card alone revived the Princess Sarah backup. Before then, I never really saw that card, but the fact that you can now go search out a free Cosmos that's 1 CP cheaper that you can then change to any color you want, and then she has that free Anthem effect on top of it. You can search out your Ovelia, you can search out your Kolka, you can search out your King of Concordia. I'll never forget that first weekend of Octagon, seeing every single person playing Sophie, and they would curve out to 5 backups in like 2 turns, sometimes 3, because they would just Sarah into this, and and here's the Kolka, and he searches this, and then I was just like, oh my gosh, I love the look of the card. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of those heroes that's like, I've got to buy extra copies of because it's just so good. Even in something like Dragoons, I loved putting it in my Dragoons deck because, hey, it grabs Alice or King of Burmecia. It grabs that key backup you want. Like, card's crazy. It's Nordstalin 2.0 if you want to call that. I've heard a lot of people complain about the card too, just like, why would they print something like this? It's so busted. But like, I don't know, like, I kind of like it. I don't know, like, I guess because my issue too is with Nordstalin was so focused into Wind and Crystal Chronicles, and again, to me, there's 2 ways you can deal with that. Either you need to ban Nordstalin so that way everything gets more variety, or print more things like it in other sets so that other sets, so not everyone's tied to Nordstalin. Tell me about Sarah, Alex.
Yeah, Sarah, you're right. Probably is the best general card in the set, one of the best cards ever been printed. I think that the one problem I probably have with Sarah, thinking about it right now, is that she has no right searching forwards, really. I think she already has a great enough range in backups. Her range of backup searching is better than Nordstalin. It's funny that it happens that it overlaps with Nordstalin in some cases, like being able to search for Epitaph and Althea in particular. And yeah, the being able to search Princess Sarah to get any color you want is a huge deal. That's really good for the game. It's really good for water as an element, and it definitely saw the resurgence. It doesn't need to search forwards. It still would have seen the exact same amount of play without it. I don't think it's like unfair that it searches forwards. It just didn't need to. So It's one of those cards. We're just going to see that card absolutely forever. This game will be on Opus XIII, and we'll still be playing Sarah, I think.
I love the way you said that, as if I could picture you like talking to her in a courtroom. You have no right to search those forwards. How could you? All right, moving to our multi-element, a card that looked bonkers to me when I saw it and continued to be bonkers. One of the just goofiest, no-brainer great cards printed, White Tiger Lassie Nimbus. I mean, I guess it technically has the restriction of it can only be played off of backups. I've never seen that to be a detriment other than them like slamming it turn 1 against you. And they started this new thing with this set where a lot of these things that have not only an on-entry effect and on-attack effect, and he was one of them. He's going to dull freeze anything on your field every single turn. And he's brave too. Like, it's so easy to overlook the brave, but he's this big 9k body. It's like, not only am I freezing you when I attack, you still have to get through me. Card was brutal. What do you think?
Yeah, I really liked it. I honestly think it's a pretty fair and balanced card. I like what people have done, myself as well, trying to figure out ways to cheat him in. Using stuff like the Dusk Warrior of Light that plays him for free from your hand, using Lena to bring him back from the break zone for free, all these kind of things. He's a very enjoyable card to build around. I do think that restriction is a lot more noticeable than it probably reads because, yeah, normally you do have to play him off 3 backups, and sometimes there are some games where you actually need to play him off 2, or you actually just don't draw 3 backups, so you can't actually do anything with him. And it also stops you being greedy with him as well, in that, like, there were the Tricolor Sophie decks that were mainly built to play Nimbus, and the problem is that if you don't get your Earth and your Water and your ICP down, you couldn't really play him properly as well as playing the rest of your deck. So if you'd been able to discard for him, he would have been absolutely over the top, and this definitely keeps him in line with the power level of other cards.
A card that I didn't rate very highly, and I think I might rate even lower now. And maybe I just haven't seen the light on it, or maybe it's just not my play style. Was the Kunshira forward, which was like, so first of all, I love to go to 5 backups. I want my backups as soon as I can. That's just the type of player I am. So a card that said it gets weaker when I get my backups up, I was like, yeah, that's not really for me. I don't think I saw its Tempest Spellblade special once, though. Like, I saw a few people use it in a few decks, but I don't know. To me, it just felt like a lamer version of Alua, like from a special standpoint. I know it had a bigger body. Did you see Kunshira much?
No, I think it's pretty garbage.
All right, well, let's go with that. Okay, so my favorite legend of the set, by far, is Golbez. I love this card, and I'm going to kind of talk about him and the Archfiends in general. I built a deck around them, and what I find so fascinating about this card, one, so far, he's the only multi-element card that has an EX burst. None of the other ones do. And I love that he's so versatile. You can play him with the Archfiends, or you can just completely ignore that part of him. You can just play him as I do in like my Cadets deck. He's on color with the Cadets. He's an EX burst, and he searches a 2-cost card, which for me, my favorite target was always Cosmos or Chaos or whatever that key card was. And so yeah, it was so cool that you could basically put him in any wind lightning thing, and he could just be good for you. And then, if you played him around the Archfiends, man, oh man, I didn't know how often I'd resolve that damage 6 effect, but I was able to do it quite a bit, and it's just the coolest thing in the world. Golbez comes down, and all the Archfiends just swarm the field. 3 counters on Cagnazzo. Rubicante's just hanging out. Scarmaglion's making something take double damage. Barbarisha, boom, 8,000 to the board. And I even saw that Golbez used with the Opus I Golbez, where people would have the Opus I Golbez, kill it, bring out the 4 Archfiends, which then resummons the new Golbez at the end of the turn. Like, he was just cool. Like, there was just cool, creative stuff you could do with him, and those are my favorite types of cards. Like, I don't even care how meta it is, even if, like, well, he's never going to be super good. He was just a neat card that you could build so many different things around.
Yeah, he's a really great card, and I think the only thing that lets him down is the element combination he's in. I think literally if he was in any other element combination other than Wind Lightning, he probably would have seen a lot more play. People would have tried a lot more with him. Mm-hmm. As it stands, people already have tried a lot. I've seen even the like Infinite Loop, Shikari, whatever decks playing Illure and trying to OTK you with White Mages and Mewns and Riku and all this stuff, playing him as a consistency piece. Like you say, Archfiends has him as an option. There's a lot of places to play him. None of them really turned out to be top tier, but he's still a great card, and I think it's one of those cards, again, basically future-proof, and the moment we see his main 2 elements as a deck that is competitive, he'll be there, and he'll definitely be part of making that deck strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, let's talk about the star of Opus 13, Sophie and her good buddy Sarah Mobius. I think Sophie was revealed before Sarah Mobius, because I remember when I first saw the card, I was like, oh, that's kind of an interesting card. Like, I wonder what that's going to be. And then Sarah Mobius got revealed, and then seeing it in action, like, I just hate this card. I hate this card so much, and it's baffling to me, and I'm not the first person to say this. Many people have said this. It is, but I can't help but think it's baffling to me that one set ago in Opus 12, we got this card called Necron, and it had all these, like, janky, really crazy ways to passively deal your opponent a point of damage. You had to have all these dark characters, but to me that was like on purpose, because they didn't want you to just be able to deal it easily, right? No, yeah, they changed their mind on that really quick. Matisky said it best, like, they flipped it and just made it trivial, and now you have these turns where you're just dying passively to this card you can't kill. That's this massive card. It has the perfect buddy in Sarah Mobius, and not only on top does it deal you damage, it draws them a card as well. I don't understand that. Like, really, they're like, okay, not only do you deal them damage, you get to draw, like, so you'll watch these Sophie decks. I'll never forget watching Sasha Stark at the RVA tournament, and he legit is playing out like 3 or 4 cards a turn, and he's got 5 cards in hand and dealing them damage. I'm just like, what? Like, and the thing is too, I don't personally like all these end of turn effects they've started adding in the game, because you can't interact with any of them. You can't Amaterasu the Sophie. You can't, even if you had something, you're not allowed to respond to it because the end of turn. So man, this card ruled the roost in the Opus. And kind of just a point I wanted to make too is, like, so I built one for my girlfriend, and it's basically an Earth Water deck, and it's crazy to me that you can put cards like Celestia and Nimbus and Delita in there. You can jam these ice cards in there, and it never color locks the deck, because at their worst, you just pitch them for the other main element, right? Whoa. Crazy. Yeah, Sophie, I won't be mad if that card disappears, and it's a monk, so just help monks. Like, Sophie, girl, you broke my heart. All right, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, they tried a little bit too hard with that one to make her good. The monk thing was one thing. The getting double buffed off, like they could have easily not made her double buffed off my element forwards, but they deliberately separated the text, so it did that. They made Sarah Mobius way too good. I think I like. Well, on one hand, I like that it created like 5 different variants of the same kind of archetypes. There's a lot of Sophie variants you can play. You're not locked into one boring old version.
Yeah.
I like that it gave monks this new life, and I like that it gave water and water earth this new life, because water earth wasn't really playable before. But it's really fun for mirror matches. But it's another deck that very much gates older archetypes that just can't keep up in that pace. It forces you to play the game in a way that most decks haven't caught up to right now. Most decks aren't comfortable with.
Yeah. And
I think it's just way too disgusting that people have been able to exploit it now. We've seen the Doga, like the thing I've been doing recently is that the Doga version of if you open or if you're like top 10 cards is Doga, like 3 summons and Ursula and Sophie, which comes up more often than you'd expect.
Yeah.
You can just go turn 1, pitch 3 summons, play Doga, pitch Sophie and something else for Ursula, pass your turn, you still have like 3 cards in hand, you've dealt them 8 points of damage, you're putting 3 forwards in front of them. Your opponent hasn't even played a backup yet.
They haven't even drawn a card.
Most cases, they're going to be on 5 damage next turn. If they're not, whatever they've done hasn't been efficient enough. Even if they Shantoto, you just recover because you still got 5 cards in hand. You sack the Sophie to kill the Ursula, so they're both in the graveyard for the next Ursula. It is way too good, and it is a bit too trivial. Sometimes that happens. It is what it is.
It is what it is. So something that I really appreciated was the new cadets we got and our new 9 legend. Man, oh man, did he feel good. Unfortunately, I don't think cadets is still quite there as an archetype yet, or tribal, whatever you want to call it. I think they do need some color fixing. I think would really help because they're still spread out across 3 elements, and like their backups especially. Like, so the new Cater, a lot of people really like that new Cater, and I like it as a card on its own, but I didn't use it in my cadets deck because I wanted the backup Cater because she's the only fire backup cadet. A new Sync was really good. I actually got to do her payoff 7k or 7 character break card. New 8 was great. I really underestimated him compared to the old 8. I was like, well, they both give you value back, right? But no, the fact that this one can be completely free and he gets that haste and he can just punch in was great. And then 9, like the fact that it's lose power versus damage is just so strong. And again, he has that on entry and on attack that if I got going with 9, it's like you have to answer this card or he will just take out anything you put in front of him. So cadets got a good boost. I don't think they're still quite there yet, but I was appreciative of the stuff we got. Do you play with cadets at all?
I didn't. I was actually quite looking forward to doing it. And like you said, the Goldbears was also a really nice addition to be able to fetch Cosmos or fetch whichever color backup you're missing, stuff like that. And I really did want to play it, but they stopped releasing cards for it. Yeah. Like they did Sync, which was cool, and they did 9, which was cool. And I was like, where's the rest?
Yeah.
There wasn't any. And it's just one of those things where they have it in their power to make cadets a tier 1 archetype if they want to. Right now, they don't want to. That's simple as... It is what it is, but it's a shame. It's not.
I was looking through some old cadet cards, and I was like, wow, in Opus 9, we got 4 cadet, or we got a couple new cadets, but we had 2 aces and 2 rems in the same set. I was just like, and then we got another ace in the next set. I was just like, again, it's like it's the FFA thing. It's like you do know there were other characters, right? Like there's a total of 14 cadets. You don't have to just make ace and rem over and over again. So yeah, that's another one that, like you said, they could do more about it if they choose to. I guess I don't want to right now. So last, but certainly not least, this was a card I rated very highly, and I think my rating was justified, and that is from Type 0, Celestia. And Celestia, again, like, I don't know. So originally I saw her as just in this water ice deck, and I did build a prison around that, and that was very fun. But again, because of the way the multi-elements work, a lot of people would put her in the Sophie decks in the Water Earth. So now you have this Sophie card that can't even be outright broken, which was kind of her main weakness, was that you could just break her outright because her power level was going to be too high. And so Celestia protecting all of that, even protecting your backups, which was relevant because I'd have people try to Fenrir my Sarah backup, be like, Celestia's on the field, you can't do that. And then anytime you chose an ice character, that effect could be very brutal, especially with Charlotte on the field. It's like every time you pick Charlotte, not only is I'm basically neutering whatever your ability is, Celestia's going to get revenge and freeze one of your stuff. Like, such a cool card. To me, she was as strong as I thought she would be, protecting Nimbus, and she just had so many, again, applications because of the fact that you could get her in all these other deck types. So what do you think of Celestia?
Yeah, cool card. Had some nice applications as like I guess I could say anti-meta card. You know, Fire Lightning had a bit of popularity early on, and it was a really nice card against that deck because a lot of their effects either broke forwards or they did 8,000 damage and never hit 9k. So Celestia was well positioned for that. At the end of the day, though, she is a 4-mana 9k do nothing, so she's really depending on the other cards to kind of carry weight and do the rest of the work while she kind of protects them. So yeah, it just so happens that the color combinations she's in kind of sucks. So yeah, we had to kind of put her with Sophie and stuff. But even then, you are detracting from that consistency. So a really nice card. Poor element combination for it.
Fair enough. All right, and that's every card we wanted to mention in Opus 13. Alex, was there any kind of final thoughts you wanted to say on the Opus or a certain card or anything in general?
Yeah, I thought overall it has been a really good set. I think there's been a lot of innovation. We've seen, you know, Japan's been the only one that's really had events outside the couple of big online ones we've had. They've seen a constant kind of progression. The rest of the world's seen a constant kind of progression, which is good. You know, it showed that even during these tough times, people were still building and innovating and making the most out of the cards, which I think is all we can really ask for. And I think we all did a good job overall. So yeah, I'm excited for the next set, and I hope it brings even more room to innovate and let people show off their creativity.
Me too, and I believe this is the last version we're getting multi-elements in, at least for the foreseeable future, and we're going to get those last combination of elements we haven't received yet. And man, these multi-element cards, like, on one hand, it kind of bugs me just how like crazy some of them are and how they're clearly like pushed and over the top. At the same time, I have really appreciated they have really opened up the game in a way I hadn't seen before, and again let you do things like I was mentioning earlier, that like you can jam these ice cards into a water earth deck and it never locks you out, it never like makes your hand awkward or anything. So yeah, they've been sometimes they do get on my nerves, but they have been exciting and they created a lot of new openings, and I have appreciated, other than nonstop Sophie, I have appreciated some of the other variety we've seen in the set. So there you go, folks. I know he's not streaming right now, but you can catch Alex on his Twitch, Mr. Cool. I'll put it down in the link below when he does get back to that. And thank you so much for joining me today, sir. I always appreciate your insight. You're a wonderful guy.
It's a pleasure to be on with you.
Absolutely. And let us know what your favorite cards were from the set. What did you nail right on the head, and what ones were you maybe wrong about? Let us know. We'll talk to you later. Take care.